I mean, seriously, you would think that was planned. Basically, I've got 19 slots in the Polytunnel this year, 19 spaces for tomatoes. And how many varieties do I have to go in the Polytunnel? You guessed it, 19. I mean, that's pure luck. That is not skill, I can tell you. Good morning, chaps. Good morning. I've just been sorting out tomatoes, which is which. I was growing so many varieties this year. Sorry, it's very bright. I've grown so many varieties this year that I've basically forgotten most of the ones that I haven't grown before, what they even were. So I go through my list and go look them all up again and check that I've got what's what. A couple of them I'd got wrong, which I will tell you about, but there's a couple of bush ones which I was about to plant in the Polytunnel, so I'm really glad I didn't do that. But going through my list and my notes and all that sort of thing, a couple of them I didn't have in the blight resistant list, which turns out to be blight resistant, so they're going to go into a different category. But right, that leaves us with all of these. I've divided them into cherries or small grapes, you know, the little ones, medium-sized round tomatoes, heart-shaped large tomatoes, and beefsteak, sort of where I've gone. I do have one plum, but there's only one of them, so I've just stuck them in with the medium chaps. So yes, right, now the next thing to work out is what order I'm going to plant them in inside the Polytunnel. But as you can see, there's clearly more than 19 tomatoes there. I have got multiples of quite a few of them. So it's just 19 varieties to go in there. So I'm going to pick the best out of them and get them set up, ready to go in the Polytunnel. And then that leaves me with quite a few doubles. A couple of them I do want to grow one at home, just because it's a particularly great tomato, or it's one I want to see whether it's going to work outside or not. There's a couple in here. For example, Beauty King is one that grows really well outdoors, as in a colder climate, doesn't have to be really superheated in a Polytunnel, but it's not blight resistant. So I'm going to take that home to grow in a pot in the back garden, because it has got less chance of getting blight in the back garden than it does here. Not for any other reason than it's just more protected there, and blight is wind-borne, and because we're obviously on an allotment site here where everybody else is growing tomatoes, it's just come through here like a huge tidal wave of blight misery. Whereas at home, no one else in the area is growing tomatoes, so they've got a much better chance of getting away with it. Anyway, I've got a little bit more sorting to do here to work out which of these is my best plant of each variety, and then I'll see you in the Polytunnel in a mo. This is them. Okay, we're at the point of planting, and I've thought about lots of different ways that I'm going to be able to talk to you about 19 tomato varieties without just being like pow, pow, pow and it becoming a chaotic mess. I was going to do them like cherry, mid-size, beefsteak, hearts, all that kind of stuff. But actually, when I started laying them out, I realised I don't want to grow them like that. So I started with my cherry tomatoes and laid them out where I want them to go, particularly two of the varieties that I've grown before, which are the Sun Gold and the Garnet. I know that they get massive and they continue producing masses of fruit all the way through until the frost. So I've directly put them opposite each other, which means that they can grow up over the roof. So I've started with them, dotted my cherries around, and then kind of worked the others in around them. So it's a bit of a cacophony. And if I try and talk to you about them all separately in their little sections whilst I'm planting them out, I'm going to get myself into a completely confused mess. So I think what I'm going to do is just start at one end and work my way around, and we'll talk about each variety as I put them in. That's my plan. Now, last year, as you'll discover in what I'm about to say, I think I got a couple of the varieties mixed up. And that's always at this stage when they go from being in their nice little labelled pots to going into the ground. So what I'm going to do is go and get myself the labels that I'm going to attach to the strings as I go. So there cannot be any mess up. Mark my words. Slight change of plan. Turns out I don't have any of them left. Which are like these little dangly labels that you tie on, are really handy because I can tie them at the top of all these strings. I don't have any. So Amazon to the rescue once again. I've just ordered some more. But it does mean that I'm going to write out labels and stick them in there until they arrive. Right, let's crack on with tomato number one. I'm actually starting with the tomato that I'm most excited about this year, and it's a bit of, this is where my labelling went wrong last year. So when we did our taste test, the one that came out for me absolutely on top, I mean it was a stunning tomato, was one that we believed to be called Alice's Dream. Initially, I mean it's like a triple gone wrong. Initially I believed it was Ananas Noir, but I think maybe I was just mysteriously confused about that because it was like a really dark purple and also yellow, like, you know, like a black pineapple. So I think that's sort of where I went wrong with that. However, I then decided that I thought it was Alice's Dream when I'd looked him up afterwards. And actually, I'm not sure that it was. This is Sart Rolais. I'll put it on the screen. But I believe that this was the tomato that we tried last year that was unbelievable in flavour. So it had if I can find the clip, I'll show you because, oh, it was amazing. It was yellow on the bottom, really quite a bright yellow, and then a purple shoulder on top. And the flavour of it, I am not kidding you, was probably the finest tomato flavour I have ever had in my life. And so I believe that this is she. I do also have the Alice's Dream a few rows up, so we will find out. We will find out this year whether this was the baby. Anyway, grow well, little chap. Next up is Dr. Green, which is a cherry tomato. It's actually a green one, this chap here, and this was such a great tomato last year. I grew it for the first time, and I mean, having a lovely sweet cherry tomato is obviously absolutely wonderful. However, I'm not that keen on that like one-dimensional sweetness flavour. I like them to have a little bit more going on than that. But if you are going to have the super sweets like Sun Gold, which is just slightly further up here, it's nice to have something that kind of offsets it. And this, although is green, it's not super tart. You do have to wait for them to ripen, which was something I did last year slightly incorrectly. I first started picking them when they were totally green, and then I realised that they need to get a little bit of a yellow blush to them to be absolutely ripe. But what a delicious cherry. It's got that real sort of, oh hang on, I'm sinking. This is very awkward. Yes. It's got a really, really beautiful flavour, which is tart, but still tomatoey. Like it's not, it doesn't taste like an unripe tomato basically. And I know green tomatoes is a thing that a lot of us get, especially if we're having a bit of a slow summer and the blight hits or whatever and you have to rescue your tomatoes, you end up with a lot of green tomatoes. These are not green tomatoes in that sense. They do ripen and they're green and they're just slightly striped. So when they're growing, they are a very pale green with a dark green stripe, and then when they just become ripe, they get like a tiny little yellow blush to them, but they're still green and they are gorgeous. And in a bowl of all the different cherries, which I'm about to take you through, it's just joy. Next up is Rebel Starfighter Prime, another one that I'm really very excited to grow. Never grown this one before. This is a total new one on me. Fantastic name. Got to grow it just for the name, to be honest, but apparently it's absolutely delicious. It is a heart-shaped little number, about fist size apparently, with excellent flavour. So what more could you want? I'm really excited about this. It's got streaks of pink and green and purple. So yeah, doesn't that sound gorgeous? Right. Wonderful, Rebel Starfighter Prime. Who's next? Sun Gold. This is an absolute, like, iconic yellow cherry tomato. It's slightly oranger than bright yellow, but it for years has won all the sweetness tests out there. Like, it's an absolute classic. It is an F1, unfortunately, which means you can't save the seed from it, which is a little bit of a shame, but it's just one of those ones that wins everything, basically. Although, having said that, there is somebody in here that has beaten it this year. So, in we go, little Sun Gold. This is one of the two cherries that I know grows absolutely mammoth and will grow up over the top over here. So it's in a spot where it's got like loads of room to go up and over. Next up is Goat Bag, another absolutely excellent name. Also sometimes apparently called cow tit. Very nice. Supposedly it looks like an udder. It's quite large. It's a pale pink colour rather than a dark red, and has a fantastic taste with very few seeds, is what I've been told about it. So that all sounds good, but no, not one I've ever grown before. So it's a bit of an experiment on that front. I know normally you plant tomatoes really, really deeply, but you might be able to see, if I tilt you down ever so slightly, I do have quite a lot of space left in this bed, and I am going to top this up. So I'm planting them deeper than the pot level that they were in. So about that sort of depth I'm planting them, but they will be topped up again. Some people are total tomato berryers, like, you know, they'll go all the way up to like here, which is fair enough because the tomatoes will grow roots out of their stems, so it doesn't matter if they're really deeply planted, and if you've got leggy tomatoes, that's always the best thing to do. But in this case, I'm just not. Who's next? We've got another cherry now. This little chap here is called Prairie Fire. Now I was going to grow this one last year, but I just didn't have space for it, so it got shunted onto this year's, and it's apparently a beauty. So it's a grape style cherry rather than a round one, which is like an elongated shape, you know, you can imagine one of those, like a mini plum. And it is orange and red striped, and again with a beautiful flavour. I've got to say, I'm very much more go on the fact that it says it's a great flavour than the colour. I mean, the colours that you can get in tomatoes these days are absolutely crazy. You can get so much variety, they're incredible. However, I don't grow tomatoes to look at, I grow them to eat. And when you read a description of a tomato that's like, this is the most beautiful tomato we've ever grown, it's stunning, it's this, it's this, it's this, and there's no mention of the flavour, that's not good, is it? Because everybody always says, like, tomatoes that you grow yourself are out of this world, and that your homegrown tomatoes just can't be beaten. But I can tell you, there are varieties out there that just taste of nothing. Style over substance, I think. Right, talking of style over substance, Brad's Atomic Grape was one that I've read about and seen for ages and thought it was absolutely magnificent, but heard some mixed reviews on the flavour. Decided to give it a go, and I've got to say I loved it. I think the mistake that a lot of people were making with it was picking it too early. So they take a really, really long time to ripen on their little truss. And it can be quite difficult because they grow from scratch in an array of colours. So like a red tomato will start off green and you know that it's ripe because it's turned red. Well, Brad's Atomic Grape starts off black and red and green stripes and speckles and all of these beautiful colours in it. But it's learning that it's when it gets the yellow tinge and that it's actually soft to the touch that it's ready, and then I don't know that it can be beaten flavour-wise. But that is where this chap comes in. This is Atomic Fusion as opposed to Atomic Grape. It's supposed to be all the joy that Brad's Atomic Grape is, except in a slightly larger tomato. So more of a plum, kind of just a mid-sized Brad's Atomic Grape. And Brad's, although wonderful, and I would say wonderful things about it, it wasn't the most prolific of tomatoes. And apparently this one, oh, that looks like I'm selling them, doesn't it? That was a bit of an advertising. I'm not sponsored by them, I promise. This supposedly has all the joy of the Brad's Atomic Grape, but it's got added size and increased reliability of cropping. So I'll just come down here. And also Brad's Grape has always been a bit of a weedy plant, and supposedly that's been sorted in this. So this is a stronger, bigger Brad's Atomic, and I'm quite looking forward to trying it. Next up is Dark Galaxy. This is not one that I've tried before. The description of it sounds magnificent. It is a round, mid-sized tomato that is a dark red with black shoulders and speckles across the outside of it that looks like a galaxy, hence the name. Lots and lots of talk of how beautiful it looks. A couple people saying it tasted magnificent, but the predominant talk has been of its looks. So we will see. Are you going to be tasty or are you going to be a letdown? Get that one in, wind it round. I'm not really talking about my method of stringing these tomatoes up because I do it every year. I feel like I've told you before how I do it, but I do realise that a lot of you haven't actually seen it before. So what I have is I dig the hole where my tomato is going to go. Then I have excess string and a little hook on the end, which I plunge right to the very bottom to anchor it and let all of that excess string dangle in the bottom of the hole. And then you plant your tomato on top of that string. You don't have to have the hook, you see, you can just have the pulled string in the bottom. And then you plant your tomato straight on top of it, pulling the string nice and taut. Sorry, I realise you've got a little, can't see, I'll give you a valley. You pull that string nice and taut and plant your tomato straight on top of it. Bring your soil up around and then you can twist this. Now the roots of the tomato will grow in and around the string on the bottom of there and really anchor it down, meaning that as the tomato goes you can just wind it around and you don't have to keep tying your tomatoes in. It's been a life-changing tomato evolution for me. But I haven't actually told you what tomato that is. That was Bliss, which is a grape, a bright yellow grape. So they come in large trusses, loads and loads of fruit, quite elongated cherry tomatoes, little tiny ones, very, very sweet. Never grown it before. But it's but it'll go really nicely in the fruit salad of cherry tomatoes that I'm growing, because the Sun Gold, although is also a yellow one, it's a much more orange yellow. This one is a very bright, bright yellow and a different shape, so nice. The next two tomatoes are two that I grow every single year. They are Black Krim and Japanese Black Truffelli. So this one is Black Krim, also known as Black Russian. Just such a fantastic tomato. They're big, they're bold, it grows a lot of fruit. They are quite a gnarly looking tomato. They're heavy, big, quite tucked in at the top, and The tops of them stay green, they don't really ripen up, so they're a little bit hard on top, but my goodness, the flavour. And they're not a classic cooking tomato, but I love cooking with them. You just put the whole tomatoes straight in and it just, oh, it's just amazing. What a great tomato. So that one is on my list every single year. And this is my other champion, the absolute joy that is the Japanese black truffelli. I love this tomato. And if you've been watching for more than about 3 years, or in fact, if you've even watched for 1 year, you will know how much I love this tomato. I really rate it. It's on my permanence list. Flavour, yes. Looks, yes. How reliable they are to grow, yes. And it's not just the tomato that looks great, like the plant themselves is a really nice contrast because it's a potato leaf one. So rather than being really feathery like these, it's like got these really kind of, well, more like a potato leaf, and I just love it. I think it's such a beautiful tomato, such an unusual shape. I always call it a coin purse shape. It kind of is very heavy in the bum and then goes up to quite a narrow neck, so it looks like a medieval coin purse, and I love it. I love this tomato. It's an absolute beauty. The first time I got seed for this was at the potato fair that they used to run in Lambeth that Pennards used to do. They do great seeds, Pennards, and it was just a complete like off-the-cuff purchase. They have all these racks and racks and racks of wonderful seed with all these like weird sort of 90s clip art drawings on them. And so I just picked us like, oh, Japanese black truffle tomato, never heard of it before, and what a day that was. Changed my tomato life. It's a joy. Next up are two that I've never grown before. Mortgage lifter. Another fantastic name, and actually I looked it up because obviously I had to remind myself what all these were. But mortgage lifter actually is called mortgage lifter because it stopped a farm going under. There was a farm that was being threatened with repossession, and the crop of these tomatoes saved the farm. So that's where it got its name from. Never grown it before. It's supposedly an absolute whopper, a real beast of a red, fat, you know, like a big red beefsteak tomato. So quite excited about that one. Oh, there we go, in you go. Lovely, lovely. Twisty, twisty. And this one at the front is called Black Moon. Now I've planted all of my blight resistant tomatoes in the bed up there, which I will show you at the end of this because I actually did it yesterday. But this one is also blight resistant. However, in the taste tests, this actually beat Sun Gold as the most delicious cherry tomato going. So I figured I will have one outside, but I've got two plants and I had a spare space in here. So we're having it in here too. So this one is outside in the beds, and it's also in here, which will be interesting to see what the difference in yield is between the two. Gorgeous, where's the label? And the final one in this run is Alice's Dream, which is the one that we don't know whether that incredible tasting tomato last year was Alice's Dream or not. So that one is going in the corner here. Get my hook in. So I don't know if you can see from there, but this is the back row of the polytunnel, and up until now I have grown the tomatoes in a single line and a single line, so they have gone just around in a U shape around the outside of, where's the label? Where's the label? Nope, can't have lost the label that quick. Right, but I've actually staggered them at the back here, so I've got two rows. If you see on the ceiling, instead of having one row, I now have two rows of strings at the back. But I haven't just increased the number of tomatoes I can grow in here by like double at the back. I've actually tried to give them a little bit more space, because each year I'm cramming slightly more in here and not changing the layout, and I think they did suffer a little bit last year, so they've got a lot more space this year and a double run at the back. Okay, 5 to go. That is garnet. So this is the other cherry that's on the opposite side from the sun gold that I know grows huge and just keeps going and will grow all the way across the top. This is a beautiful cherry. This is one I grow every year actually as well. It is a very dark, perfectly plain, round cherry red tomato. It's darker than a bright red sort of standard tomato red colour, but it's just beautiful and it's got a really earthy taste. In actual fact, it's a very small cherry that has the flavour of a big fat heirloom beefsteak, dark, like, whoa, kind of tomato, which is joyous, absolutely joyous. Come on, garnet. In we go. And funnily enough, having said that it is a cherry with a beefsteak flavour, its next door neighbour just there, hold on, let me get this chap in. Its next door neighbour here is the opposite. It is a beefsteak with a cherry tomato flavour. It's called a pork chop. It is bright yellow. It's a joy. This one came out really brilliantly in our taste test last year. We both really loved it. It had, yeah, it was that kind of real joyous cherry tomato flavour, like a pop and a love, but in a massive tomato. We had a couple of these just sliced on a sandwich. Oh, you just, I mean, a bit of salt. I mean, obviously you need a load of salt on a tomato, but just sliced. It was one of those ones where, you know, you want a variety. I know I keep talking about like having variety in the tomatoes, but I don't think, until you've grown your own tomatoes, I don't think you quite grasp the variety that is within like tomatoes. They can be completely different from each other. But what was nice about this is the same way that I'm talking about having a cacophony of cherry tomatoes in like a cherry tomato salad. When you have big fat sliced beefsteak tomatoes, you know, with a bit of basil and olive oil and salt over the top of it. God, I'm so looking forward to that. It's really nice to have a variety of flavour in that. And so the combination of pure joy last year was the pork chop and the Japanese black truffelli, because they got totally opposite ends of the spectrum kind of tomato flavour, and the two of them together, I am not kidding you. It was everything. If you could bottle that combination, it was like the essence of what growing your own tomatoes is. Joy. 2 left, and one of them is black strawberry. So JB gave me these. He did, I don't know how many tomatoes JB grows actually. He's more of a chili man, isn't he? Chilies and peppers this year. But he recommended this one as his favourite from last year. I don't know much about it other than he said it was absolutely delicious, and I believe it's quite small and quite a pale pink and black streaky number. So that one is going in the corner here. It's got quite a lot of room in this spot because I'm not entirely sure how it grows. In you go, Chapo. This is a very tall tomato actually compared to my others. And then the final tomato, Black Beauty, which is a real Instagram tomato. It is black, like not how I talk about the other tomatoes being black, like black Krim or Japanese black truffelli, where they've got that really, really dark, like purpley tinge to them. No, these are black. I always thought that it was just like people putting filters on their, you know, tomato photos on, well, on Instagram basically. Until somebody gave me some seed for it, and I was like, right, I'll give it a go, because I had heard it also tasted quite nice, and grew it last year, and I can tell you, it's actually black. It looks like somebody has coloured it in with a Sharpie. But the more direct sun that it gets, the darker the tomato fruit actually is, which is why it's in this particular position, because it's closest to the door and gets the most direct light in here. And that, oh no, don't put your label in, Jessie. Put your label in, right. And that, chaps, is the Polytunnel tomatoes for 2024. Woo! Sergeant Pepper. This is Oxheart tomato, and it is pale pink. Also one I've never grown before, so this is a first for me. In you go. A little bit of a wrap. Label in. Tomatoes in. Now I've actually already planted the ones outside. Like I said, I planted them yesterday, so I'll just show you that now. You know, just in case we didn't have enough varieties already. I'm using the same frame that I used last year for the tomatoes. There is space for 9 of them here. We've just cleared out the last of the broad beans, so that last harvest has been done. We've got a lot of beans to process at home. There's space for 9 tomatoes in this bed, just grown straight up the centre, and I have 4 varieties out here. All of the tomatoes that I'm growing outside at the allotment are blight resistant because we get blight without fail every single year, so there's just no point trying to grow susceptible tomatoes outside up here. So the 4 varieties that I've got, we've got Burlesque, which is a big red beefsteak. We have got Nagina, which is a small-ish red slicer, you know, a round mid-sized tomato. We've got Crocchini, which is a red, slightly elongated cherry. And there is the double up of the Black Moon that we've also got in the Polytunnel, and that is the end of it, I promise. Well, I tell you what, it's a good thing that we got the tomatoes in that early in the week, because we went home that day having achieved like all the tomatoes in, feeling very pleased with myself, and then from that day the weather has taken an enormous nosedive. It has looked pretty much like this most days, but alternating, so it goes like this for 20 minutes, then the bright sunshine back out again, and then it's back to this again, and it just we've been it's been racing up to the allotment to do something, and then by the time you've actually got there it's raining again, and then it's hide in the shed, so it hasn't been great for filming. But anyway, cheers chaps. We did go back up, but like I say, it's not very good for filming, where there was blowing a gale and there's thunderstorms coming across and everything. So did a couple of bits, and the first thing that we had to do actually was a bit of a sad task. You know, when I did the plot tour, what was it, like 2-3 weeks ago now, I was talking about the fact that we've had some really serious dieback on my beloved apricot tree. Well, at the time, it was the front half, but the back section still had like lots of apricots on it and was still looking really good. So I was thinking I was going to be able to chop back one half of it and we'd just have a weird shaped tree, but it'll still be there. Well, unfortunately, it's gone, basically. The whole back half of the tree has also started to die now. So we decided to cut our losses and pull off any apricots that were actually on there. They'd started to go orange, which means that then the birds and the squirrels and the pigeons and everybody else starts to attack them. If the tree's really healthy, they tend to go really quick from that starting to go orange stage to then being actually ripe, so we can pick them all and it's all wonderful. But it just really didn't look like it was going to happen. The tree was looking really, really sad on that side. So we just decided we were going to take everything off that was on there, and we'll see if we can do something with them at home. It might make jam or put them in a cake or something like that. Unfortunately, I can't just rip that old one out and plant a new one for 2 reasons. Firstly, I have no idea what variety of apricot that was. It was a rescue job, and it was already quite a well-established tree when we dug it out and transferred it onto the allotment. So it was a bit of a mammoth task in itself, but that meant that we didn't actually know what variety it was. And most apricots that I know of that are being grown in the UK either have to be grown up against like a south-facing sunny wall or under protection of some sort, but that one just absolutely thrived out in the open like that. So yeah, I think if we tried to buy a new one, I don't even know what I'm looking for really. And secondly, whatever's happened to the apricot is likely to carry over onto anything, even if we don't plant it in the same spot, just having it on the allotment. So that would include peaches and apricots, nectarines, that kind of thing. So I fear my days of eating beautiful, fresh, perfect, miraculous apricots are behind me. But it is not all doom and gloom on the fruit front. The berry bushes and things like the soft fruit that we've been growing in the fruit cage has done really well this year. The gooseberries have been fab, but what's quite interesting is, I don't know if you remember, at the beginning of the year when I was pruning the gooseberries, I say fan training, but that makes it sound much fancier than it is. All I'm trying to do is keep them a bit 2D so that when you're picking the gooseberries, you don't have to reach all the way in because they're just absolutely lethal. So just keeping them flat means that they take up less space in the fruit cage and also they're easier to pick. So when I was fan training my gooseberries, I'd been told 2 contradictory methods of pruning for them to encourage more fruit. And in that space, I've got 2 red ones and 2 green ones. So I decided to split them up and just see which worked better. So one of the red ones I pruned one way and the other one I pruned the other way, if you see what I mean. And oddly, what's actually ended up happening is I've had fantastic fruit on the red ones and barely anything on the green ones. That wasn't the divide for the pruning methods. So we're actually none the wiser. Absolutely none the wiser. But we got good red gooseberries this year and they are absolutely delicious. They don't cook as well as the green ones. Like the green ones are really super tart and like gooseberry fool, oh, it's amazing. Gooseberry crumble, all that kind of stuff because they're so tart. Whereas the red ones are much more of like a fresh eating berry, but I'm not complaining. They're absolutely delicious. Also, the Loganberry has been a wild success. It's still producing fruit, although it's kind of coming to a tail end now. And that is something that needs to be pruned. As soon as it's finished fruiting, you cut all of those old stems off. And since spring, it's been shooting out these lovely new strong stems. So I'll cut all the old stuff off and then train the new stems up, and then that will be next year's fruit. So it's super simple. So I've got to get onto that. And the black currants. We had a couple of years where we just haven't had any black currants at all, and this year they've been fantastic. Apart from there's a bit of aphid infestation on the plant, which is why they've got those like gnarled leaves. The aphids have got in underneath the leaf and like curled them over. Just ignore that. They're fine. But yeah, really nice to be able to walk away with a nice little punnet of fresh fruit like that. So what else did we do this week? Oh, on one of my trips up to the allotment where I was hiding in the shed because of downpours, I decided that I was getting a bit chaotic with the seed. So I collected all the seed that I had in the shed, which is like, where's my box? So it's this box completely jammed full of packets of seed, and then all these like pots of just seed everywhere of stuff that I've taken up to sow, sown or not sown, and then just forgotten to bring back. So that's something that I've been getting on with this week, is going through the seed that I want to sow for July, because we're past the midsummer point. So it's things like the mustards I can start getting in now. These are the 2 that I grow, which is Green Wave and Dragon's Tongue. Outstanding mustards. Mustards is a bit of a misleading name though. They don't taste like mustard, and it's not like a mustard cress. It's like a big soft leaf that you wilt down, like a, yeah, for cooking really, not like a mustard cress. And you wouldn't know they're a mustard. It's just sort of, they're more like a sort of turnip top type flavour, but absolutely delicious. So really pleased to be getting them in, and I'll sow them in 2 waves. So I'll do some probably next week or the week after, which will be for early, and then late August I will sow another lot, which will be the things which are going to grow in the polytunnel over winter. So I'm starting to think about the sowings for winter and kind of the second half of the year now. So those, I've got to sow more turnips. I'm going to put the last sowing of peas in next week. I've got loads of chard that needs potting up and kicking out of the greenhouse, and I'm going to put some more in as well. I'm actually doing a bit of an exchange because I sowed, which ones did I sow this time? I did Lucullus, peppermint, the Bietta green chard, and Ford Hook white, I think, were the ones I did. Anyway, my Ford Hook, my white stemmed ones, not sausages germinated, absolutely nothing. And George, actually the bloke who gave us the Loganberries, he had the opposite. So none of his peppermint chard or his red stemmed chard came up at all. He's got loads of white, so we're going to do a bit of an exchange, and I need to get some more of them in. There's also beetroot. Some of the quicker maturing varieties are still time to get in, so I'm going to get them in this week. So I've been bed prepping. Like, one of the other things that I managed to do this week, ducking from the rain, was to get some compost on some of the beds. So we did a bit of clearance. There was still some bits and pieces left over from last year, and there's a bit of chard, a bit of chicory, that kind of thing, which we hadn't cleared away yet. So I was clearing beds, putting the mulch down, all the kind of stuff which isn't that exciting in terms of filming, but really needed to get done. So that was handy because it was just too wet to have the camera out and about with me. And something else that we got done this week, which was really pleasing, is because we got all the tomatoes out of the way, I needed to go through everything that we had growing in the greenhouse, because it gets to that point where you keep like moving things around, shuffling them backwards and forwards, and you kind of lose track a bit. And one of the things that we just had so many things that needed to be thrown away. So loads of potted up brassicas that had then been eaten. There's a little stalk and you're still feeling optimistic that something's going to like come back from that stalk. So we had, I mean, I'm not kidding, probably about 30 of those little square black potting up pots in there that just had nothing in them but hope. And I finally decided, look, it's not going to happen. Even if they did kind of start sprouting now, it'd be too late for them and they'd be stunted. So I cleared out a load of space, and that means that next week, if this weather continues, we've still got some good jobs we can get done, because in the greenhouse, I've now got all my peppers are ready to be potted up into the quad grows, which are this newfangled thing. If you've been watching or listening to Potty Mouth, or in fact watching JB's channel or Tony's channel or any of those guys, they all talk about these like semi-automated watering feeding pots. I think there's chili grow, quad grow, there's about 5 different varieties of them. Anyway, I got 8 pots off Ian at Grown Local, and I'm well excited about them. I've had them for so long in a huge box in the shed, raring to go, and now we've cleared out the greenhouse. That's going to be a job for next week. So next week I'm going to be back on the sowing front. I'm going to be potting stuff up. Because the polytunnel has been on hold, the greenhouse has been a little bit like a storage unit rather than actually getting it set up for growing. So yeah, melons, cucumbers, chilies, peppers, aubergines, all of that kind of stuff that's just been kind of growing away in their small pots is going to be potted up. And it's actually going to start looking like we're getting somewhere. I hope. Now all we need is for the weather to sort itself out, because this is no good. This is no good. It's proper like jumper, coat and hat weather. It's July. It's July. Anyway, chaps, I've done a lot of rambling this time. Oh, this is a mostly talking one, isn't it? There's not a great deal of music in this one. Sorry about that if you like to watch this and just chill out and listen to some music with me buzzing around doing things quickly. Well, not this week, I promise. Next week we'll be back at it. Anyway. Cheers to the Monday Club, who are that list of names that you see at the end of every video. They are what keep this vlog going. They are the supports, the little stilts that hold this vlog up. So huge thank you to them, and thank you to everybody else who is watching. Come on, sunshine. Come on, sunshine. Cheers, chaps. Actually, it's not come on, sunshine, because we've been having sunshine. I just want more than 20 minutes of sunshine at a time. Like, choose your path, weather. Choose your path.